Hi there friends, and welcome to my advanced tips and tricks guide for Spellcaster University. I'm Icon, and in this video we're going to talk about all manner of little tweaks and tricks which will make your university more successful. I'm going to talk about game mechanics that are more interesting once you are deeper into the game and how you can abuse and utilize them as good as you can. After that's all been said and done, I also want to go into the selection of books in this video a little bit deeper, because these spell books here, I think a couple of them are way more attractive than others, so we're going to sift through these books a little bit as well. Okay, so I started up a really fresh school here. I haven't invited any students yet. I just put up a couple of rooms to get a little bit of a tutorial going. One thing that I want to emphasize as much as possible before I start out with anything else, the alchemy and the arcane room are the most important rooms to fetch as early as possible. When you can get your hands on them, just pick them up, because arcane mana and alchemy mana can't be acquired by your friendly neighbors on the maps, and therefore whenever you can get these mana colors, you're well off. Whereas if you don't get nature, light, or shadow mana, you can easily acquire these from the orcs, green mana, and light mana from the Inquisition, and shadow mana from the Cemetery, aka the Lord of Evil. So therefore, these two mana colors are really, really attractive to pick them up. And one thing that I really didn't discover for a long, long time is that these new students cards can be heavily abused if you want to do so, because at the head teacher's office you can set up the application fee of your students, and you can just set up the application for 30 gold pieces, play that card, and then pick up all the students for 30 gold pieces each, and then go back to your regular settings and get back to 15 gold pieces. The application fee will reduce the amount of people that get attracted by your school, but since the card doesn't ever get changed by this is a pretty nice thing. If you really need the money, later down the road I rarely do so because I feel like it's not that important and not that attractive, but I figured that in the long run this is really cool to kickstart your university. I want to talk about houses here at the beginning of this video too, because I felt like with the houses there are a couple of things which I personally found anti-intuitive, but they're pretty good. So overall, don't spend too much time with these magical specialization traits. They are very specific, and most of the time you don't really need them too much. Way more important are generalistic traits. As a rule of thumb, the more often a trait is positive for you, the better. So for example, learns all magic 10% faster. A wonderful example. This triggers every time. Shadow Disciple only triggers when I learn shadow magic, so not too interesting. Beautiful. Well, character loses much less sanity when insulted because they're beautiful. So this is also, they only have a benefit from this trait if they lose sanity. So worker is the best way to go. And this way you can always pick up the best traits for your personal situation when you ask yourself, which trait will be yielding the most results? For example, here, more mana while studying, misbehaves half as much, or ambitious. So ambitious only triggers after the curriculum, so, well, I don't like that trait too much. Well behaved is one thing which I would prefer if I would have had a lot of students and not too many jails, other artifacts, whereas diligent is a trait which is always good. You will never be feeling bad about you having more mana while studying, so off you go. With the priorities, I would only prioritize something if a quest forces me to do so. Beyond that, well, priorities aren't too important. So here goes the same with this house. We're going to go for passionate because 4th and last magic levels are really good, and here we have to decide between athletic and popular. Well, normally I would always prefer athletic over popular because athletic is just awesome. The faster your students move, the more they can learn. But one thing about popular, it's always really, really good to have a house which has the popular trait, which is focused on arcana. Simple reason behind that. There is one job which your students can have at the end of the run, and that's the Minstrel. Minstrels don't do anything except for generating 5 prestige. Deep Folk students generate 1% of pushback on the Lord of Evil's power bar per point of prestige their graduation is worth. So what does that have to do with popularity and arcana, you might ask yourself? The Minstrel job requires the student to have the popular trait. Check. This is just done by being part of this house now. And the other thing, which is why I prefer arcana, is a minstrel is being made by being popular and having access to temporal magic. So this way you can fetch yourself quite an easy way of producing minstrels which have a stupid amount of pushback towards the Lord of Evil. This is something I really, really love to do. And beyond that, well, popular doesn't have too many uses, but I personally think it's a very, very, very powerful thing to go for in regards of deep folk, because, you know, deep folk minstrels are really easy to put up. They only need 2 or 3 points of temporal magic and popular trait, and you're good to go. So beyond that, if you want to optimize your school, there's a couple of things that you can do. First off, the items that increase the efficiency of a room are insanely good, but what's also insanely good is to select items which actually give you a sort of a passive learning ability. There's a couple of items which just let you learn something while the students spend time in the room. So artifacts which just do that are your best friends, basically, because they can provide for you tons of different learning factors. I really like to use those, especially in the situations where I have to put up a certain job for the quests. For example, your job needs, let's say, a purple school and herbalism. So putting then items which let you learn herbalism into all these rooms is just awesome. So with these items that give you some sort of learning effect, there's tons of those, teaching you all manner of different magics. For example, well, I don't have one here right now, but I'm going to show you them as soon as we have one. But the long story short, the artifacts which teach stuff to your students in the room while they are active are really powerful. Either serve them into the teaching room if you want to do the quests easier, or what I also discovered, what's really, really good, was to put these learning items into the rooms which I call service buildings, like dormitories and students' halls and all these things. When your students actually learn something while resting, I personally love that. Okay, so these things are quite obvious. Let's go to some less obvious thing, and that's the pick chamber. I consider the pick chamber as one of the most important buildings that you can have. Up to 3 students can use the pick chamber to communicate with the outside world and speed up communications with factions. What this actually does is that your students go regularly into the tower and fling some guinea pigs over to your neighbors. This speeds up the process of gaining these guinea pig thingies, and the real powerful thing about that is you just generate more opportunities to interact with your neighbors. Why is that so good? Basically, your neighbors are the best, or the local map here is the best way of pushing back the Lord of Evil in the long run. You can use favor with the king and with the orcs directly to fight back the Lord of Evil, and therefore it's really, really powerful to have as many messengers as possible. That's why if you can get your hands on a pick chamber, get it as quick as possible. It's just so good, I can't put it into words. Talking about pushing back the Lord of Evil, I want to showcase the Sign of the Eldest here, which I personally consider as one of the most powerful artifacts in that regard. Well, let's check it out here. The Sign of the Eldest needs demonology and portal magic and does one thing: when the people wearing it, they repel the Lord of Evil by 1%. So basically, with that card alone, you can generate a lot of pushback onto the Lord of Evil without spending too many resources. As you see here, we're using the new Elves card yet again for that method, and then put back the costs. This is one really useful thing that I really enjoyed. One more thing about the rules here. What I found really useful in the long run was using the sponsor card as soon as you are really successful, like when your prestige goes over 100 plus. It's really not bad, because at some point your school just earns more prestige than it actually needs. Really good is also to do some pre-selection once you're established enough, because the pre-selection system here says if you have no pre-selection, which is the default setting, you will attract a few more students. Sorry. What I noticed was that at some point this setting attracts way more students than I actually would want to have. So getting some focus into these things, I found that extremely useful. Another thing there, as soon as your school is extremely successful and you don't need the money too much anymore, you can swap over to free meals and higher salaries for the teachers, because this all makes your school work faster and more efficient. You can crank out a lot of efficiency by using that. I made the experience that a lot of my schools tend to be super effective and super efficient at year 6 to 8. I rarely use all the gold and such, so I came up with the thought I might spend it otherwise. Artifacts wise, I want to emphasize another thing, and that's the Wolf's Tooth, or generally all artifacts which influence the movement or the growth of needs of your students. So basically everything which makes your students faster is good for you, and everything which makes your students grow hungry, slower, and all these things are awesome because they translate directly into more learning time. So extra mana generation on the artifacts is nice and dandy, but I personally felt like I had the most impact on moving faster and lower needs. With the future quest, which is my opinion the hardest of the star quests, I really like to say go for something easy, like these guys that need 20 each. This is a very easy way to accomplish it, to accomplish your goal. All you need is, for example, here to put up a focus into shadow and light magic into all your houses and you're good to go. Or just ideally here, portal master, only one magic. This is really good to go. Only choose the more difficult fates here if you really know what you're doing and you feel like, man, I want to have a challenge. Otherwise, it's never a shame to skimp out on the easiest solutions there. I found that really, really useful, at least. Okay, so another thing which is already which has been already pointed out a lot by me in the past, but I want to emphasize the Sneaky Merchant Campsite one more time here, because this place is really good. Classrooms, this is always general classrooms. Artifacts, always artifacts to upgrade with, because when you have multiples of the artifacts, the necessary level here lowers. This is a really good way of amping up your artifacts. And last but not least, there's always some ways to just buy some decorations here, which brings us to the banners. Banners, I can't emphasize enough how good banners are. The strongest banners for me are the Orc and the King banner, because you can use Orc and King favor to push back the Lord of Evil, but basically every banner is awesome. And yet again, put them where a lot of students are going to be working at. It's either the refectory or the dormitories are really good candidates for that. You can go either way. So the Arcane Crystal Staff is also worth mentioning, because this is again a very generalistic trait. Remember what I said before when I was talking about the houses? This is true for basically the whole game. The more generalistic a buff is, the more often it is useful. the more attractive it is. Here we're going to take the interdimensional room because I want to have the portal magic, of course. Okay, so last but not least, try to amp up the rooms efficiency-wise that are important for your careers or important for your flavor. That's it's hard to tell what kind of favor or focus you should put up, but amp up the buildings that are necessary for your futures, and beyond that, amp up the buildings that feel good for you. You can either go for dungeon run schools, or for it's really hard to emphasize any focus onto any certain magic type beyond what you have here. Here's one, Sacred Stained Glass Window. This one I wanted to showcase because these are really, really powerful. These make really good students. The more you have of those, the better. Also, bed upgrades goes without saying. I love bed upgrades, especially those which give gold. Everything which gives gold is good for you, but I called that out more than enough times in other tutorials. So one more thing about building the school: try to mix service buildings into the school as much as possible, because the more service buildings you have, the better. Because whenever your students grow hungry, bored, or whatever, they will try to reach a room where they can satisfy their needs. If they don't find one, they will leave the school, and that's not really cool. So last but not least, I want to say that it's always good to have one item of each, be that a artifact, be that a room, be that a pet, be that anything. It's really powerful to have these out of a simple reason, because they manipulate your events by a lot. So basically, the more items there are in your school, the better. Upgrading rooms, I only do upgrade school rooms. I only upgrade service rooms when I really have enough of those. I personally consider enough of the service rooms when I have 3 to 4 refectories, 3 to 4 dormitories and such. It's up to you. I don't know how big you want to build your school. I can't really give you a good measure there. It's up to you how you want to do that. Okay. So I think that was enough about this topic. With these tips, you should be able to crank up the efficiency of your school by a lot. Keep in mind that your schools get the more successful, the more different futures you have in your school, aka graduations. And the last thing that I want to mention in this screen is when your school goes down at the end of this bar, everybody on your school will graduate. You can really use that to your own favor if you re-roll all the end graduations into something which not gives a temporary but a permanent buff. This is tedious, but it's really, really worth it. Okay, so we're now going to talk about the books which you can draft, because I really find them very, very appealing. So we're going to talk about a few level 1, 2, and 3 spellbooks. So with the spellbooks here, it is the same thing that I mentioned before. The more often it is useful for you, the better. The level 1 spellbooks, usually you want to try to skimp out on those and have more stars than that, because they are really, really... most of them are really not useful. Like here, Orc Reputation gain 25%, start each level with a random nature card. Well, here it is the same thing. Misbehaving students are, for me, the most attractive thing, whereas the other factors are specific and less interesting. Among the level 1 books, there's not a single one which I would really, really recommend too much. They are rather quirky and give rather low buffs. That one which reduces the student's misbehaving ratio is one of the best. So tier 2 spellbooks are more interesting here again. I really love the home magic book with the janitor card, because janitors, they just clean up your school, just like the name implies, and it's really cool to have one from the get-go. Or random equipment cards from the Blacksmith Master Spellbook. I like that one too. It is random, it can really gimp you, and the janitor is more reliable, but you know, I love gambles sometimes. Alchemy learning rate here is a very specific thing. Like I said before, not too good. So, Here we go for more specific buffs, increases the efficiency of rooms adjacent to light rooms and arcane rooms. I dislike these a lot, even though they are powerful, but I don't like books which try to influence my way of building the school. The Red Dragon card is almost always useful, so we're going to stick with that one. But if these appeal to you, they are good, because at the end of the day, everything which gives you efficiency is really good. So, spellbook level 3, and these are the ones that you really want to have if you can. Great Book of Runes is pretty sick. It makes it so that scriptoriums increase the efficiency of rooms in the same row by 30%. This is a bit of a nasty deal, because it would make you want to spam too many rune scriptoriums because they buff up the rows, but, well, I avoid that book a tad bit because it influences my building badly. Sports Almanac gives you 700 gold pieces every year. Well, it's easy to overestimate that. I enjoyed that one in the Darkness Challenge, but beyond that, I wouldn't take that. Here we go for the Elder Codex, making your teachers better than usual. Just an awesome thing. Best thing again, because like I mentioned before, pretty generic things versus specialized things. Okay, so Book of Wisdom is just the pendant to what we had before for the teachers. Here we have a book which lowers the needs for wearing artifacts pretty good, but this is by far my most favorite tier 3 book, and I personally think it needs a nerf. The cost of card increases half as fast after a purchase. It's basically the game is working like the first card is costing you 100 gold, then 150, then 200, or whatever the scaling is. This cuts the cost creep in half. So if the next card would cost 150 usually, it would now be 125. This translates into way more cards across the board, and I really can't emphasize enough how stupidly powerful I think this book is. Okay, but there's a couple of more books in this game, but I think we covered up how to decide which ones you want to have versus one another. If there are any questions left, feel free to ask away. The books aren't as easy to generalize. Okay, so that's all I wanted to say for this run. I'm bringing up a new guide, especially for dungeons, because dungeons are really cool, and I have to talk about dungeons in this whole video. I did that on purpose, because, you know, dungeons are something else. The last thing that I want to mention is try to spread your students on as many schools as possible, but also try to use the houses to specialize your students. I personally fared really well with schools that have all 5 colors, but houses which specialize into certain colors to make dungeon runs easier, because my personal approach was there was only one reason to specialize my students in this game so far, and that was to two reasons actually. Either breed certain graduations or be better off with dungeon runs because I wanted to learn certain skills. But this is going to be the content of another video. So thanks for watching. Drop your comments down below if there are any questions left, or if you find there's something I really missed out mentioning. No problem. Put it down there. I'd be very happy to allocate more knowledge. Last but not least, also put a thumbs up on that video if you liked it, and check out my channel. I do daily videos, so you might want to subscribe there and turn on those notifications to not miss anything in the future. Beyond that, down there in the description box, you will find my Twitch channel where I do daily streams, so if you might want to check that out, I'd be really happy. And last but not least, if you might want to reach out a helping hand for my channel, there's links to Ko-fi, Patreon, whatever. If you might want to check them out, I'd be really happy. If not, just let me tell you that I'm very grateful for you watching this video. See you guys next time. Bye bye.